Welcome. We're about to dive into one of the most dramatic chapters in the Gospels. You see, the ninth chapter of Mark is really a story of two completely different worlds: the absolute peak of divine glory and the valley of human desperation. Together, let's unpack the profound lessons this journey teaches us about faith, power, and what it really costs to follow Christ.
And it all really kicks off with this prayer. Honestly, it's one of the most powerful and raw prayers in all of Scripture. This cry from a desperate father just perfectly captures the tension that runs through this whole chapter. That sincere desire to believe, wrestling with the doubt that plagues us all, it's really the heart of our faith journey, isn't it?
So our analysis starts at the top of the mountain. The first scene transports us to one of the most spectacular moments in Jesus' ministry, the Transfiguration. It's a fleeting moment, but an absolutely breathtaking vision of his heavenly glory. Now, this is absolutely key. The Transfiguration wasn't just some isolated miracle. Think of it more like a preview, a sneak peek of the kingdom in all its power and glory. It was God's way of strengthening Peter, James, and John for the trials that were just around the corner, showing them the true divine nature of the one they were following.
And here is where we find the brutal contrast that defines this entire chapter. On the mountain, you have divine glory and celestial power. But down below, in the valley, is a completely different story: human failure, faltering faith, and very real suffering. It's in this descent from the peak of a spiritual experience back down to the reality of everyday life that our faith is truly put to the test.
So let's go down into that valley. Here, the scene changes dramatically. The disciples who stayed behind are confronted by a desperate father, a boy tormented by a spirit, and their own frustrating spiritual powerlessness.
And that leads us to the central question of this whole story. I mean, they'd already been given authority, they'd performed miracles before, so why did they fail this time? Jesus' answer is one of the most important lessons about the spiritual life you'll ever hear.
Jesus reveals that the problem wasn't the demon's power, but the spiritual weakness of his own followers. While the 3 were up on the mountain, it seems the 9 down in the valley had given in to discouragement, maybe even jealousy for not being chosen. They were lacking that deep, constant communion, that life of prayer, which is the only source of true spiritual power.
And right here is the divine principle in action. See, God isn't just looking for people to use his power. He's looking for a relationship built on trust and total surrender. It's from that intimacy that power flows naturally. Faith and surrender always come before power.
The disciples' struggle, however, wasn't just against external forces. There was an internal battle going on. They barely got out of that situation, and they were already arguing among themselves about status and position, proving they still hadn't grasped the nature of Christ's kingdom.
They were asking the wrong question, driven by the wrong motives. And Jesus' answer completely flips the world's logic about power, success, and leadership right on its head.
What a revolutionary definition! True greatness isn't found in being served, but in serving. It's not about accumulating power, but about humbling yourself to lift others up. The greatest in the kingdom is the one who loves the most and serves the best, with the simple heart of a child.
And here's the bottom line. Jesus makes it crystal clear that internal rivalries, pride, and this obsession with greatness completely undermine the Christian witness. Unity is a pillar of strength and credibility. Division, on the other hand, just shatters that credibility completely.
And from this point, the conversation gets even more serious. Jesus begins to teach about the real cost of discipleship, and he uses some strong language to talk about the gravity of sin. Now, obviously, Jesus is using powerful metaphors here. He's not talking about literal self-harm. He's talking about the need for radical, decisive action against anything that pulls us away from God. Being a disciple demands a constant battle against our own worst enemy, ourselves. Finally, Jesus concludes this intense chapter of teachings with a metaphor that really defines our purpose in the world. So, salt has 2 main jobs. It preserves and it adds flavor. As disciples, we're called to be an influence that preserves what is good, pure, and just in the world. And at the same time, we're called to bring the flavor of the gospel by living in peace with each other and showing a different way of life.
And this is such a powerful conclusion. Salt that's lost its flavor, that's no longer salty, well, it's useless. In the same way, a version of Christianity that has no influence, no impact, isn't fulfilling its purpose. Only those who are transformed and seasoned by the message of the gospel can truly live in peace and carry out the mission we've been given. And so we end with this question for you to reflect on.
Mark 9 challenges us to look at our own journey. Are we just seeking the glory of the mountain, or are we learning the lessons of the valley? Are we fighting for greatness, or are we bending down to serve? And finally, what kind of salt are we being? What is the flavor, the influence that our faith is leaving on the lives of those around us?